A few weeks ago, I had the chance to chat with Julian to get some industry insider tips for aspiring producers, and I'm here to share that with you today. For those that don't know, Julian is a techno, electro, and progressive house artist based in Los Angeles. He has released on coveted labels such as Mousetrap, Anjuna, Monster Cat, Enhanced, as well as many others. He has played major festivals like EDC Las Vegas, EDC Orlando, Okeechobee, Imagine Festival, and has toured with deadmau5, IO, and Tritonal, just to name a few. In the first half of this video, we'll be going over key topics for producers such as signing with record labels, branding, promotion, and much more. The second half of this video is a little bit more of a laid-back conversation between me and Julian. So without further ado, let's get into it. I want to talk about production standards. So what specific things do you think that are absolutely necessary for a track to have to be considered professional quality?
First, thank you for having me. I appreciate you having me on the channel. So I think in general, if music sounds good, it sounds good, and that should be your baseline of everything in audio. But there are some things, more nuanced things, and some thresholds to that where you don't want to cross. Like if something sounds poorly mixed or poorly mastered, poorly produced, it's going to diminish its external reach. Obviously, I was taught at a young age that like you will always find an audience. There's someone out there bound to enjoy your music out of the billions of people that live on the earth. So you can always find an audience. It's just how big of an audience you want to reach, right? So if you want to reach the biggest possible audience, you want to reach the people that enjoy a certain sound or a certain type of production. You want to have music that fits within that sound. So rather than thinking about it in terms of quality, I think like what are like the baseline things that you should have to appear attractive to the most people that you're trying to reach within the market that you're trying to reach, if that's a goal of yours. Some people just, don't care or think about the market at all, and it's just sheerly, something for myself, and that's fine too.
When it comes to like those like production necessities, and I know that you said like obviously like mixing and stuff, would you say that there are any like key things, like say you're listening to somebody's track, would you say that there are any key things that you notice in the track that make you realize like this is like a little not quite up to par?
Yeah, I think that at a base level, good music theory is something that is generally attractive to most listeners, like things that sound harmonically correct, like whether it's the note choices, whether it's like the way the chords move and the chord progression. There's some chord progressions that connect more with Western audiences that, are tried and true, like a 1-5-7 or like a 1-5-6-4. It's just nostalgic in a way. I think a lot of Westerners connect with certain chord progressions, and those things are attractive to some people. So I value that a lot in my music. Some people don't, especially in like the atonal or like, more monotone music, like let's say like techno or what have you.
Right.
But I think that personally, really well thought out musical writing is important. I think fullness in your spectrum is important. That's like, do you have instruments in every octave of the spectrum, filling in the audio frequencies throughout the entire spectrum, so you have that fullness that like a traditionally or generally considered good song has.
Right.
Sense. Fullness in the spectrum is pretty important too. Like, is the song lacking anything is something you should be considering, but also like, are you overloading the song with things just because you can? I've seen that as like a thing that a lot of newer producers will do, just because we have this infinite canvas of like unlimited tracks, seemingly. In a DAW, obviously, you have like computational limits, but because you have all that ability to add new things, sometimes people will add things just to add things. And I think that it's best to actually try to make the most out of a few things rather than, adding things and layers just to try to squeeze them in because you can. Or like there's this tendency to layer 5 different basses to try to make one good bass instead of like making one good bass in the beginning. really good producer that was kind of a mentor to me early on, Deadmau5.
Julian Gray. Oh, that name sounds fucking familiar. No stranger to Mousetrap.
He can have a track with like 15 channels and the thing sounds incredibly full and incredibly rich. And that's due to the sound design. It's not necessarily like layering a million things together to make it full sounding, if that makes sense.
For sure. So also, I guess like kind of in that same atmosphere, what about loudness?
Yeah.
How do you personally achieve that? And also, how important is that when like sending off to like a record label and all that? And what like level of luffs would you go for normally?
Yeah, I don't like to think of music in terms of like checking boxes and like is it reaching this loudness threshold that's going to make people like the song or not? It's not going to make or break your song almost ever. An A&R will be listening in isolation. They'll only notice if it's like categorically way too quiet.
Right,
Like,
for sure.
I would say what's more important than like arbitrarily reaching a luff count or like a certain volume level or amplitude or what have you is to actually just make it sound as rich and good as possible. Like some genres really benefit from like over limiting. Like you can think of artists like Skrillex or people in that kind of lane where a lot of the tone of the genre is actually just pushing Pro L to like the maximum.
Right.
Whereas there's other genres like, you know, IDM or like even like rock and other non-electronic genres where the dynamic range is really crucial to the writing. Like that difference between really quiet and really loud is important. So I think it really depends on your genre. It depends on like the culture of the genre you're writing and like the sonic characteristics of what makes that genre. I wouldn't target like a specific luff count, but if you want to be like that and use like the right side of your brain to try to calculate whether your masters are right or not, I would say referencing is important. Like find the closest match in the genre you're trying to do and see if you can find how loud that is. But again, I think personally, and I know a lot of my music friends agree that it's more important to be like clear, crisp, as high fidelity as possible, as like good sounding, quote unquote, as possible. I hate to use such a like artist word, but as good sounding as possible is more important than like as loud as possible, I think, these days.
Okay. And then also last thing along those terms, do you ever clip any of your tracks purposefully?
Yeah, so I actually had this conversation with No Mana a year or two ago. I think he was the one who turned me on to clipping. And I made this YouTube video. It's probably one of the bigger videos on clipping now. Part of my journey as an artist, I was a YouTuber for many years doing Ableton videos, and I've evolved into like a full-time touring DJ artist. But I have this history on YouTube, and whenever I find really interesting things, I like to share it on YouTube. And he had shared that with me, and I made this video comparing like the tonal quality of like clipping Ableton plus 6 versus like running it through Pro L2. And I actually in a lot of the demos preferred the clipping, and it was kind of an eye-opening moment for me where I realized that a lot of the traditional rhetoric, as it were, for music is very just, it's just that it's traditional and like historically proven, but there's a lot of things that can be broken and you can do interesting things outside of like the confines of traditional music production knowledge. That's not to say that you should clip every track, but there's something cool and sonically interesting about clipping versus limiting, and it can be part of your toolkit. Sweet. I use it on my heavier stuff all the time.
Okay, so moving on from there, let's talk about record labels.
Yeah.
So like I said, you've signed with quite a few different well-known record labels. Which label was the first label that you released on?
Oh boy. The first label I released on was this boutique called Revamped Recordings. I think I put out my first single called Run. I actually just did I had a show in Seattle, and the singer from Run came out, and we performed it for the first time. It was a great moment. But we did that back in 2014, actually, when I was like still in high school. And that was my first introduction to like the label world. I followed that with a release on Gravitas. Closey used to release on there quite a bit. And then eventually I caught the ear of Deadmau5, and I started releasing on Mousetrap. That led to Anjuna Beats, which is Above and Beyond's label, eventually Monster Cat, and then Black Hole, Enhanced Music, among others.
So would you say that it was just kind of a natural progression? Like you get in the door with like a smaller label and then you kind of just build up credibility from there?
Yeah, I had this conversation with one of the A&Rs of Anjuna Beats back on Clubhouse during the COVID lockdown when Clubhouse was like a thing. And he kind of told me, and he put it in a very good way, that Anjuna Beats will never be like your first label. And I think there's like a lot of truth to that for most record labels. It's like you kind of have to earn the interest and the trust of the label. Now, it's not to say that you can't get signed on your first track ever. I've seen that happen before, but it's generally more attractive to a label when you're already rolling. Like you already have music coming out, you have something happening, you're doing something cool, and you have an identity of your own. I own a record label called Graydient Collective, and when I'm A&Ring for that, I'm always looking for like, are they consistently making good music? Is it like of a consistent style? And then also like, what else surrounding the music is cool? Like, is it a cool brand? Is it like cool visual direction and that sort of thing? So I think developing all of that, maybe on your own or through smaller labels, is important to getting to the next step of like the bigger boutiques like Mousetrap or Anjuna. And then ultimately, if you want to reach for the majors like, Atlantic or what have you, I think that's the progression you go.
So what was your decision-making process in deciding to start your own record label? What went into that and what led to that decision?
I think it's a natural progression of any artist that comes into a place of a platform, I should say. When you grow that platform, a lot of us, especially the DJs of the world like me, we just really like sharing music we like. And I'm also a mentor to a lot of artists. I as a proxy of my YouTube background, I teach students and I work with small artists every day. And sometimes I find artists that way, and I'm like, man, this is really good. If we can't find a label for this, I would love to like help you release this. So by a proxy of those two things, of like music I really like and artists that I really believe in, I started the imprint in like 2019. And it started slower. Now it's kind of going heavier. We've had some really cool artists over the years. A lot of like Mousetrap artists and Anjuna artists, familiar family artists on releasing on Graydient.
So going back to like when you were talking about branding and all of that, what kind of tips do you have there?
I think that more than ever before, we're in this world now where people care about the surrounding world more than the music itself. Yep. And I will say that has always been the case. Like if you think about like pop idols of the 80s and the 70s or 60s even, it's like you care, a lot of people I should say, care more about like the hype factor or like the cool factor of the artist more than the music itself. But we're in this era now where music is so like trivial, it's very in the background, that a lot of people will fall in love with an artist and then the music is secondary. So I think it's rather important now to have something outside of the music that makes you attractive to a listener, a record label, whatever, Spotify playlist or what have you. Even if like a general listener that stumbles onto you on YouTube, it's like if you have just like a boring cover art and that's like all you have on your channel, versus like having like interviews or like interesting things you're doing or performing and that sort of stuff, you have a higher probability of converting them into a listener if you're doing more. So I think that branding and especially like building that world around your music that's not just like song on SoundCloud, song on Spotify or whatever, is crucial now. And I
Yeah.
know a lot of musicians that agree with that.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I feel like when I look at like some of the biggest artists, it's because like they have great music, but then they've also created an entire world around it. They kind of like figure out how to package it and sell it,
Yeah.
basically. That's how I see it. So
Think about like the Madions or the Dead Mouses of the world, right? Like they're the ones that are really moving mountains with their fan base. Like people are diehards for them, and I think they get that deep because the world is so so deep, I should say, and the world enables people to get that lost in it. You know, like Madion will go through like 6 month long ARGs for a song release. You know, it's
mhm,
like nobody else is doing that, and I think that's what's so attractive about him. Porter Robinson's another one. Some of my favorite artists.
for sure. Do you know about Death Pact at all?
Yeah, yeah. I've never met him or them or
Yeah,
whatever.
whatever it is.
But yeah, they were releasing on Mousetrap around the time I was. So I'm familiar with them, and I know that they're very serious about their like branding and the storytelling, which is really cool. I
Yeah.
admire that a lot. I try to approach my projects with the same level of like finesse, you know.
So moving on to financial aspects, I feel like that's something that a lot of people kind of would like to like see the curtain pulled back on a little bit. Not how much money you make, but like how you are making money and how you're supporting yourself as an artist.
Sure. Um, Without disclosing too much, I think that most musicians have many income streams now.
Yeah.
It's just kind of the reality of the world we live in. I mean, Spotify and other DSPs have made it difficult, not impossible. Like if you are a huge artist and you're getting millions of streams a month and you own your masters and you're getting 100% of it, I've seen this where people can live off of that 100%. But generally speaking, if you're dealing with labels and splits and you're working with other collaborators or songwriters or what have you, that money is getting divvied up even, you know, at the micro level. So even if you're making millions of streams, oftentimes you're not making that much money. So I think that most musicians now have some sort of side hustle, whether it's like, you know, history and finance or like some sort of other creative facet. Like a good friend of mine, Sophie from Sophie Needs a Ladder, we did a record together a few years ago. She's like a professional choreographer at like a high level. She does like Avril Lavigne and or she used to do Avril Lavigne. She did Motley Crue and that sort of stuff.
Hmm.
And for me, I actually run a creative agency. So I do basically everything I do for my Julian Gray project for other people. So like design, video, motion graphics, like live audio, live video, music production, music post production, and that sort of stuff. And I do it for, you know, clients like Boiler Room, Insomniac. One of my big ones right now is There Is a Light Recordings, owned by Cian and The Archer. But yeah, I think having some sort of external monetary thing to feed the creative thing is really crucial right now. I also run my label. I have my YouTube channel, which makes a fair amount of money. I have client work outside of that. And then obviously, I was saying before, I do my mentorship. So I take on students one-to-one and have a call with them each month for a subscription. So those are my ways of dealing with the monetary struggles of being an artist. I know that many people have different ways of approaching it.
For sure.
And it is a very valid problem. Like I know artists that at high level, like higher than me, that are struggling monetarily. So if you're out there and you're like a smaller artist and you're not like living off of your music, at least you know that it's shared even at a high level.
It is interesting to hear more about that kind of stuff. And also just the way COVID affected everything.
Yeah.
Because so I mean, so many artists rely so heavily on touring and playing shows to bring in that money, and to have that like all go away, I feel like it caused a shift of sorts. And you see now like guys like Eliminate like on YouTube, and like he's killing it right now. So yeah, it's interesting, and I feel like that probably put in a lot of artists' minds that like maybe I need to diversify. So it's interesting to look at those different aspects of, ways that you can make it work.
Yeah, I think it's like a lot of finance professionals will tell you like you need a diversified income, and that applies just as much to music. Like you can't live solely off of tour money because it's just such a fickle industry. Um, it's generally a better idea to try to diversify into other things too.
For
Even
sure.
like huge artists will like they'll have like their tour stuff, like stadium level tours, and then they'll also have like a finance investment company or like something off to the side that's actually stable and making money that doesn't rely on like ticket sales
Yeah.
because it can be really fickle and challenging, especially when you have a worldwide pandemic.
Yeah,
So
no doubt. So going back to your agency thing, because I didn't know that you did that originally, but I did see that you posted something about it on your Instagram. So can you talk a little bit more about like when you started that, what led you to start it, everything like that?
yeah, so I'm like I was mentioning before, I've been a YouTuber since like 2010. And when you're a YouTuber, as I'm sure you know, as a fellow YouTuber, you kind of have to learn to do everything. Like you have to learn to be a designer, you have to learn to be a video editor, music, audio editor, and a motion graphics at a higher level. And eventually, I got to this point where I was pretty skilled at all of those things from like doing that 3 times a week for like several years in a row for videos on YouTube. And that as I translated my career from YouTuber to like full-time musician, it became like, wow, this is really useful because now I can design the cover arts. I can design like the way the album looks. I can design like the way music videos look, and I can shoot music videos, and I can edit the music videos. And as I was doing that, I was like, wow, I should do this for every song. So then it became like every song has like this visual identity, or every EP or album or whatever. And then that evolved into like, okay, I'm doing this now. I'm really efficient at this. I should offer this to other people. And I started my agency. It's called Asaka Gray. It's not like formally launched. Like I haven't like announced it anywhere. I guess this is kind of the first time I've announced it, but it's existed in the background for probably the past 4 or 5 years.
Okay,
Yeah.
nice. So it just clicked in my head that so you started YouTube in 2010, but you didn't start producing it till 2012.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Which
interesting.
experience, right? So just as a short story on that, I was actually into DJing first. So
Okay.
I became a YouTuber teaching virtual DJ. And the way that happened was I was DJing house parties like as a literal child. I was like in like class parties, pool parties for my neighborhood. And I had this friend of mine that wanted to learn how to DJ. So I as like a just something I would do for a friend, I recorded a video on how to DJ and virtual DJ. I put it on YouTube, and at the time it was like maybe like 20,000 streams or something. It went like semi viral, which was pretty big in YouTube in that time, and especially for me as like a 15-year-old. So I was like, okay, that worked really well. I'm gonna make like more of these, and then I eventually made like this whole series on virtual DJing videos, and that evolved into like a DJ channel, which I was doing like virtual DJ, Tractor, a little bit of Serato, and that eventually evolved into the next thing, which is live performance. So it's like Ableton Live, and that's where the Ableton tutorial thing came from. So like
Okay.
that was the natural progression of like going from DJ in his bedroom teaching his friend how to use really whatever software into like Ableton YouTuber full time. And then eventually I was invited to Ableton headquarters because my Ableton videos were doing so well
Dang.
at a very like influential age for me. I was like 17 coming out of high school. Like, what do I do with my life? And one of the people there was like, you should not go to music school. You could teach them anything that they would teach you because you're doing this on YouTube already. And that was like a huge thing for me to like pursue music full time and become like a music education guy.
Dude, that's crazy. So how long were you
That
producing? Like,
video, it wouldn't have happened. Yeah.
how long were you producing before you started putting out those tutorials? Like the first ones?
The funny thing is I was kind of learning as I was teaching. And a lot of people say that, like, or a lot of teachers say that, like, you kind of learn as you teach. The more you teach, the more it, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, it crystallizes in your mind. Like, it really solidifies itself. Like the knowledge that you're teaching. It, like, when you're teaching it, you have to kind of internalize it and become very you know what you're talking about. So I would study something really intentionally, and then I would make a tutorial on it. And, like, by proxy of that, I have, like, all of these Ableton videos on specific, like, devices, like how to use a compressor, how to use, like, a EQ or whatever. And I would teach myself, like, through and through with the Ableton manual, like, how to do those things. And yeah, I just learned through doing. So I was producing, like, I had a pretty good knowledge of production. I would say maybe 2013. But, I wasn't the producer I am today then, and I was still making YouTube videos. So you don't have to be a professional, I don't think, to be making videos and sharing what you know. It's just a wise idea to, like, study up and to make sure that you preface that, you're not, like, an incredible producer or whatever.
Yeah,
And then to all the people watching, like, don't watch videos from producers that you don't like their music. I think that's something that people look over a lot. Like, why am I following a tutorial if I don't like your music?
for sure. I guess
Yeah.
unless it's like basic stuff, like just
Right.
learning the
Right.
interface or whatever. But yeah,
Sure.
I agree. Um,
General,
so
yeah.
so on that, obviously, like, the tutorial landscape on YouTube has changed quite a bit in the last decade or more. I feel like I remember that back, like, 8 years ago or whatever, it was these very long form videos. They were pretty dry and unedited. And now you've got people that are cranking out like these 10-minute videos that it's super high energy. Like, you want to
Right.
make this sound? I'll show you in 5 minutes. And then,
Right.
so do you think that that's like better, worse, or neutral? I guess that there are, like, the way that it has changed.
Yeah.
Because I guess my thoughts on it is, if I was starting out producing in 2024 and I just type in Ableton tutorial on YouTube, I feel like I might get caught up in more advanced techniques without having that foundation. So,
Yeah. I think that both of those editing styles hold their own place. Like, I think that the really quick jump cutty energy uh, editing style is really good for entertainment and, like, quick tips. But I don't think that you get as much information as something long form. That could just be a generational thing. Like, I grew up in the 2010s era of YouTube, but I just find that if somebody is taking the time to really explain something, like what every parameter is doing, it helps me internalize exactly what's going on. Um, what I find a lot of newer YouTubers are doing, and again, I might sound like an old head here on YouTube, but a lot of newer YouTubers are, like, overly editing to the point where you lose a lot of information just for the sake of, like, making it algorithmically, like, uh, powerful. I don't know what the word is to use, but, like, compatible with the algorithm. Which I think is destructive to the point you're trying to get across if it's a super knowledgeable video. If you can afford to cut and you can make it higher energy and still get the same information across, that's great. But I wouldn't, like, over trim for the sake of for the sake of length if you're trying to do something long form. Now, if you're trying to make something, high energy and entertaining, something for, like, shorts or reels or whatever, that's a whole different, like, type of entertainment. That's a whole different, like, demographic, I think. And that's also something that a lot of tutorial people don't realize now either, is, like, those are two very different demographics of people. Like, somebody looking for a 5-hour course on Ableton is a different demographic from the person who's looking for, like, a 2-minute quick hit of, like, dopamine tip.
yeah, totally.
So I think don't edit in the way that you're not trying to reach, I guess, is the best way I can put that. Like, don't edit for the wrong audience, I guess.
Yeah.
Trying to reach like a longer form, like you're making masterclass style coursework, don't edit it like a TikTok, and
Yeah.
vice versa.
That's
Um,
fair.
yeah, it's kind of
So
my philosophy on it, at least.
I just had a thought when you were saying that this all kind of ties back into the record label thing. So the question is about samples because obviously Splice is like extremely popular. Um, I feel like one shots like that's like its own thing, but as far as like loops, like how problematic could that be? Like let's say that you have a track that's all like it's all MIDI and one shots, but there's like one loop that you used. How do record labels see that?
I think it's only an issue for an A&R if it's highly recognizable
Yeah,
in like a negative way, if that makes sense. Like there are certain loops that are recognizable in a good way. Like let's say like an amen break in drum and bass is like that's like cool and of the culture.
yeah,
Like that like like the vocal I can't do it with my mouth, but there's like
yeah.
a vocal chopped amen thing that's really cool. And that might not be an issue, but they might have a problem with like the copyright. But um if it's something that's very recognizable, a label might take issue with that. A big one is vocals. Like labels do not like sampled vocals just because they know that there's 100 other tracks out there with the same vocal,
Yeah.
probably some of better and some of worse quality than what you've sent them. So like you're either going to be like overshadowed by like a really good one, or you're going to be like dragged down by like a bad one that's like using the same vocal. So I think that samples are fine and loops are fine as long as they're not super recognizable. If you're going to use like drums, add some stuff to it, or like change the key, or like cut some of the transients out so that it doesn't feel like completely stolen from Splice. I don't want to use the word stolen. I don't like that for samples. I think like
Yeah.
um
Just not like copy and pasted, basically,
copy
like make
from
it your own,
Splice.
process it a
Yeah,
little bit.
exactly. There's not, and this is like the bottom line is there's nothing wrong with it. Like if you like what you're making, that's fine. It's just like in the context of a record label or an A&R, they might find issue with you using a splice vocal or using like a melodic loop that's been heard 50 times before. So my rule of thumb is like modify the loops. And if you do use vocals, try to like really hide what the original sounds like.
Okay. Have you ever run into an issue with that with Graydient? Because basically, like my question is about like YouTube content ID. Have you ever signed a
Right.
track and then you upload it and then you realize that like, oh, like it's getting hit with a copyright claim?
That is a good question. I have signed a handful of songs on Gradient that utilize splice vocals just because I felt like it was fine. Like it made the song, it was good. And without it, it wouldn't have been the same song. Um, that is a genuine fear though. Like the copyright ID, like mislabeling a track with a melodic idea that was open source, but then somebody else is claiming as their own. I think though, at the end of the day, you can chase down and like refute any copyright strike like that, just because it's like it's based on the source material. Um, it is like a pain, but I think that you would win in a court of law, or like if you were to fight it against YouTube.
For sure. I
Or
mean, it's in
sound.
the terms and conditions of Splice, so yeah.
And I know for a fact that Spotify and other DSPs are not content ID checking. Like there's
Right.
so much rampant like genuine copyright abuse sampling on Spotify that I know that they're not checking. So it's really only YouTube and SoundCloud. But I think that even there, you can chase it up. If somebody's trying to copyright claim you, you can fight it.
So let's move on to promotion. How much self-promotion do you do for your music, and how much importance are you placing on that?
Yeah. I mean, for every track I put out, like I was mentioning before, I do like a full media campaign. I'll do like a photo shoot, I'll do a music video, sometimes a lyric video, I'll try to build like a visual world. And this is an advantage I have as a graphic designer. I can do that for free. But I believe that if you really have a vision for something, you put together a mood board, and you can really articulate it to a designer, you can go on Fiverr and find visual artists that can convey the world you're trying to build. And you can have like a bigger world than just the song. So every track that I release, or every EP, or every era, I should say, I do like a pretty decent visual rollout. And I know that's unique. Like a lot of artists don't do that, but it's just something I'm really passionate about as a fan of like artists that were really curated, Porter and Madeon and Deadmau5 and Daft Punk and those kind of artists.
Yeah, I do think that's important because I feel like, at least me personally, with my favorite artist, it's more than just the music. Obviously, the music is what attracted me to them, but they've got that whole world. So yeah, I do think that's good.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think about like how did you discover your favorite artist? It's probably not just the music. It was probably like an interview that they did on X and Y publication. You thought that thing they said was interesting, or like something caught your eye that they did. Like I can think of like when I originally discovered Deadmau5, it was because of his Blue Screen of Death live show, and I thought that was like really cool at the time. It was like 2009 or something. When I first discovered Daft Punk, it was because of the novelty of the helmets and stuff, and then the Madeon stuff was like the world building. So was Porter Robinson. It was like I liked the music, but what really enthralled me was like the person behind it and the story behind the project. So I think that that's so crucial to promotion, is like storytelling. And a lot of like gurus on TikTok and Reels and stuff, they're always like preaching about how the most important thing to go viral and stuff is to tell stories. And I fully believe that is true, even from like a traditional media perspective, like a PR perspective.
Yeah, I agree with that. So how much do you think that your YouTube channel has impacted your career? Because I do feel like having your own personal YouTube channel is a bit of that storytelling kind of. It gives people a little bit more of a glimpse into who the person is behind the art.
Yeah, it's like a internal vlog or whatever. Like the same reason you would like a laid back Luke. He's very open about like who he is behind the scenes, or Deadmau5 even. Like he used to do like Ustream and Twitch and whatever, Mixer. I think it's helped me in amazing ways. Like I know that a lot of my fans are actually fans of my YouTube channel, and they have retroactively started liking my music, which is kind of to my point I was making a minute ago. Like I reached them that way, and then they became a fan of my music. I know that it's added a lot of credibility to my like production. Like people take my opinion on my music seriously, and A&Rs take it seriously, and I think also like with collaborators and stuff. And then obviously like you have like the social media weight of having a big YouTube channel, which is always attractive to record labels or whoever. It always helps.
So I think that's pretty much it as far as at least the notes that I covered. Yeah, I guess just like you could talk a little bit about what like where you grew up, what life was like, how your interest in music started, basically what events took place that got you to where you are now and put you on that path.
Yeah, I grew up in a suburb of Washington, D.C. and Maryland called Bowie. My dad is a guitarist. He used to teach guitar. My mom was like of the industrial early new wave scene, like New Order, Depeche Mode. So between those things, I was interested in music writing, and I was interested in electronic music. My grandma was in PR. She was like the production manager of an ad agency when she was younger, one of the first female production managers in DC. And that got me really into marketing. So I was kind of bred from my family to be like this, electronic music adjacent marketing person, I guess, like doing things outwardly. And then at a younger age, like I would say maybe like 11 or 10, I had a friend that introduced me to Daft Punk by burning me their discography on CDs, like blank CDs back when that was a thing. And I went through and I listened through all of those. I fell in love with Daft Punk. I fell in love with DJ Hero and like that era of the internet. And then that led me to Dead Mouse. Dead Mouse was like my favorite artist for a long time. I made a lot of music that sounded kind of like that for my early years. And that eventually led into me being very involved in the Mousetrap, Dead Mouse community. And eventually, later on, he caught wind of me. I'm not sure how. And I sent in a track on one of his streams, and he thought I was actually already signed to Mousetrap. It was really funny. But I actually wasn't yet at that time. And then I met him again at Countdown here in LA. It was actually the day I met IO as well. We were geeking about how much we love Dead Mouse. This is before he launched the IO project.
Was this in the Fox days?
Yeah, and we were like mutually like, okay, we have to go talk to him because he's like right there in like the green room thing, and we were both like, okay, we're gonna go. And then like he eventually chickened out, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go and meet Joel. And that's actually what got me signed to Mousetrap. He signed my Autonomous EP back in 2017, 2018, like very early 2018. And yeah, that was a really fond memory for me. That was a great night. I got signed to Mousetrap. I met Garrett, and I met Joel all in the same night.
So would you say that's been like your big moment, basically, where you feel like it's like, all right, I kind of have like a foot in the door?
Yeah, I will say, and this is a good topic actually. Once you have momentum, it's easy to open new doors. The first door to open is the hardest one to open. Once you have that foot in the industry, then people start to take you seriously, I think. Because once Dead Mouse is co-signing you, it's not that hard to get releases on Anjuna Beats or Monster Cat or whatever, Enhanced. But getting that first release is the hardest part, like on one of those bigger boutique labels like that. So that was like a pinnacle moment for me, for sure. It was a really exciting moment. And that's when I really pivoted from like YouTuber to like full on musician full time. It was around that time, 2018.
Sweet.
Yeah.
So what do you remember what the first like electronic track you ever heard was?
Oh man. It really depends on what you consider electronic music, because my mom was really into new wave, so there's a lot of Depeche Mode in the house, which is like pseudo electronic music. It's like electronic with like rock infusion. I would say probably it's Kraftwerk. I'm not sure which one, but it was from I can't recall the album title right now, but my dad used to play it around the house. We had it on vinyl. So that was probably my first electronic song. And then later down the road, it became like the early Dead Mouse stuff. Or, I'm sorry, the early Daft Punk stuff. When my friend burned me those aforementioned CDs. This is like middle school, like sixth grade or something.
So was this like pre or post 2007 Alive tour? Do you remember?
It had to be like right around that time.
Okay.
Yeah. It wasn't quite Tron, but it was like around the time of Alive, I think. This is like, probably like shortly thereafter, like 2008, 2009. Yeah.
Man, dude, that's pretty crazy that Kraftwerk was like your introduction. I guess, I mean, it makes sense if it was like something your dad was listening to, but that's wild. Like my parents didn't listen to electronic music, so I just kind of found it on my own. And like Kraftwerk was somebody that I probably didn't even know who they were until a few years ago. And I went back and listened to them. And like, I mean, truthfully, I'm not crazy about it, but it is really cool that it's like, wow, they were doing this like in like the 60s and 70s. Like that's pretty wild.
Yeah.
I do love Tan's music. Do you know that one?
I don't know if I do. I'd have to hear it to know. But
that one is like, I feel like that's a masterpiece. I love that song. But yeah, everything else, it's like, it's cool for what it is, but I'm not like super into it.
Yeah, I'm pretty eclectic across the board. I listen to a lot of different stuff. My dad kind of introduced me to stuff as early as like late 1800s to like all the way to what was relevant at the time, like in the 2000s, because he's a big music aficionado. So I really have a eclectic ear for music. I like a lot of different things. So I really appreciate that stuff. Also really love like the Beatles and their early electronic music. Like late Beatles is very electronic infused, which is pretty cool.
What other kind of stuff are you listening to, like in the present day, that's not electronic? Like what other genres are you
I
into?
I love alternative, specifically like math rock, um, whatever you call Radiohead, Coldplay, that sort of stuff. It's kind of my go-to stuff when I'm not listening to electronic music. Every morning I have like a routine set up in my house because my house is like automated, and I have like bossa nova and jazz just like playing for the first hour of my day. Um, and then like it really just depends. Like if I'm cleaning around the house, I put on Night Rider on Spotify or whatever. I'm guilty of the playlistification of music somewhat,
Okay. So
but
do you
yeah.
search for a lot of new music, or do you stay kind of like more in like your progressive house lane?
I wouldn't say I stay in progressive house. I stay to the artist that I'm already familiar with unless I otherwise find a new artist. I'm
Yeah.
kind of traditionalist in the way that I don't listen to like a song from an artist. I kind of like go down the deep dive of the artist. Like if I fall in love with a song, I will try to like go on a rabbit hole of everything they've put out. Um, I'm that kind of listener. But that doesn't necessarily get defined by any genre. It's just like whatever catches my ear at the time. Like I love whenever I hear a new Radiohead, whenever I hear a new Filter, Nine Inch Nails, whatever.
Are there any small upcoming artists that you've got your eye on that you think are really killing it right now?
I think if you look at the Gradient artist list,
Fair.
that kind of defines who I think are killing it. But specifically, I have some friends who are really talented. Forseti is really talented. My good friend Villager, he had a release with Mousetrap not too long ago. He's just coming up really cool in the techno underground thing here in LA. There's this artist called Jace in Philadelphia. She makes this incredibly unique, charming music. It's very like nurture esque, but it's not quite nurture. She has like a classical violin background, so her way she approaches music is very different from like a traditional producer. So I'm constantly impressed by her stuff. Um, and yeah, anybody on the Gradient catalog, I think I really pride myself in those artists. They're incredible at what they do. So
And did they reach out to you or did you find them?
it's just been different ways per artist. Like some of them are like homies that released on Mousetrap that were friends in the past, and are like, do you want to do a release on my latest compilation? Like I had Matt Lang on there, I had Monster Get Down, um a handful of other Mousetrap guys, I had some Anduna guys, and then there's other artists, like I said, where it'll be like a student I'm mentoring or somebody I'm consulting for, and I'm like, this is really cool. I want to try to help put this out. And occasionally that happens too. And then sometimes people will send me music, and I'm just like, yeah, that's really cool. Let me put it out. So a variety of ways. But those are
Sweet.
some of my favorite artists right now are the Gradient artists.
Yeah, I'm gonna look them up after this. I just wrote them down in my notes. So
Cool.
hopefully I got the spelling right. I'll check with that
I
on
will
you.
I will
Check with you
send
on that later.
I will text it to you.
All
Yeah.
right. Sweet. Let's see what else.
Anything.
What are you like into outside of music? What are your hobbies?
Yeah. I'm the type of guy who hyper fixates on a hobby for like 6 months and then I'm over it. So I'm constantly juggling certain things, but I think the ones that have really stuck with me over the years are like computers. I'm a very big vintage computer collector, especially Apple. Like I have like ancient like 1990s 1980s Apple computers, and I love running old software on them. I recently posted a video of Ableton version 1 on my
Yeah,
1990 book, which is
yeah.
pretty cool. I'm also oddly into model trains. I don't have the space in my current loft to do that, but I love that world. Lego, it's pretty cool. And then obviously all the stuff I'm into, like design, video, motion graphics, and anything really with a computer is my domain. Um, that's kind of the world I live in. Cats.
Sweet. Yeah, dude, I love cats too. Just
Cats are hard to argue with.
oh yeah, for sure. How many do you have?
I have two. I have
Okay.
Juno and Henson.
Juno and Vincent
Henson. It's
Henson.
kind of a weird name. It's named after Jim Henson, the creator of the Muppets.
Oh yeah,
One
sweet.
of my heroes. Yeah. I have I can't change my camera angle, but I have a vintage. This is a cool crossover. It's a vintage 1995 Think Different Apple poster with Jim Henson and Kermit the Frog. Pretty cool.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I did see that. I watched your tour of your loft
oh,
video kind of
cool,
thing.
cool.
Yeah.
It's
So
changed a lot since then, but the room doesn't change.
how long have you been there for?
2020. I moved.
Okay, that's a good bit.
We've been in downtown ever since. It's pretty cool.
When did you move to Los Angeles from DC?
Oh yeah, that's an interesting story. I had some friends on Facebook that we met in an EDM forum, which actually is surprisingly prolific. Like a lot of bigger artists have come from that forum now.
Hmm.
It was called the EDM Collective, EDM Producer Network, and I met some guys on there, and I came to visit my aunt here in LA for like a month or something. She used to live here, and that month I basically went to as many shows and as many like things as I could go to. I met up with those friends online that I had, and one of the events I went to, some guy came up to me and was like, "Oh my God, you're Julian. I know your tutorials. I know like your videos." And he pulled out his like Dead Mouse wallet and he's like, "You sound just like him." Um, he's now one of my best friends, but that was a turning point moment where I'm like, I need to be in LA. So then I was talking with some of those friends I had mentioned that I'd met on Facebook, and one of them offered to let me sleep on their floor. So right out of high school, I I was literally like 18 years old. I moved the summer I got out of high school and slept on the floor of my friend's house that I hardly knew. I hung out for like that few week period, but then I basically took a suitcase with all my things. I realize this is like the most cliche Hollywood story, but I crashed on his floor for like a few years, like 2 years, and then eventually got signed to Mousetrap, and that kind of became like an in towards making money and stuff in the music industry. So evolved into living on my own, and now we're here.
Sweet.
But that was a huge risk that my fully developed mind probably would not have done, but I'm glad that I did in that point of my life.
So, what benefits do you get from living in Los Angeles? And like, how important do you think location is for you personally?
For me personally, I get a lot of benefits and like the ability to go to shows in like the network here. My community really is important to me. Like the people I associate with all live here, which is the main thing that actually keeps me here. A lot of what you can do online these days, but there is something to like going to a show and showing face and like meeting the promoter, meeting the label manager, like in person adds a lot of validity and depth to your relationship outside of like emailing, you know.
For
Like
sure.
if you have a conversation with a label manager and then you meet them in person, it's like hugely valuable. I think that there is a notion that you have to live in LA to like make it as an EDM producer or whatever, but I don't really subscribe to that. I think that the only real thing is that you have to be like active and you have to be like, in the community, whether that's like in your local community, whether it's like, whatever city you live in, or like online. I think you just have to be making noise and you have to be like being intentional about being active. That's the main thing. Because I've seen people, including myself, like I'll go through periods in LA where I'm like staying in too much, where I'm like, I'm paying all this money to live here and I'm not like fully utilizing the city. And that happens to a lot of us. Like we just kind of become complacent and like stay inside and not actually utilize what we're paying for here. But I think if you are fully utilizing LA, it can be a very powerful tool to like meet people because there's a show every day and there's like cool people around every corner. So pros and cons, very expensive, kind of crazy, but there is cool people here. I don't think it's by any means like essential, like some people say it is. I was gonna say, is YouTube like your primary goal? Like, are you trying to do like documentary and stuff?
No, I would say I'm kind of just figuring it out as I go, but I would say that it's just like the first step to like get out there, I guess, like do something that'll get noticed. And I would like to expand in a lot of different directions. I definitely want to do more collaborative things in the future.
Yeah.
And I think it would be cool even bringing in multiple people somehow and doing something like that. I kind of want to host like a production competition thing, kind of like what Andrew Wong does. I don't want to just straight up rip off his idea. I'd have to come up with something fresh, but I think that would be really fun, especially if I did like a pro versus amateur competition type thing. Like
Yeah.
bring someone in who's like actually like doing it full time and then like somebody who's like a hobbyist and like see how they stack up.
And watch the professional get dunked on.
Yep. It's got to happen at some point if I did enough episodes.
That would be funny.
Um yeah, still kind of figuring that out as I go, but I've definitely made a lot of connections in like the past 9 or 10 months that I've done YouTube. So I feel like it's going pretty well, and I think that each next step will kind of just naturally present
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah, I gotta say, I mean, I love your documentaries. Like I thought I knew everything about Joel, and then I saw your documentary, and I was like, shit.
Yeah. Well, I learn stuff too, like whenever I do it. I think the only artist that I've done where I didn't learn a single thing was Odessa. And that
Mm,
was because I love Odessa. I'm like a huge fan. And so I did them first, just because I knew all that stuff basically. And then
yeah, sure.
yeah. But yeah,
I was
I
like that with Dead Mouse when I was a kid. I knew all of the quote unquote lore. And then I haven't followed it that closely recently, but yeah, your video enlightened me on a few things I didn't even know. So cool.
yeah. Yeah, I just kind of noticed that like that documentary style video had gotten popular on YouTube, but no one was really doing it for electronic music.
Right.
And so really, I started my channel in 2022, but I didn't post anything for like a year because I didn't know what I was going to post.
Right.
I was like, all right, I'm going to start a YouTube channel. It's like, now what kind of content should I make?
Yeah.
And it just hit me one day. I was like, I would personally really like if someone put out like documentaries about like my favorite artists. And
Yeah.
there's a little bit of that. There's some other guys. Shout out like Cult Figure Club, Seeds. I think Naughty Step has like a few, but
Right.
yeah, for the most part, I feel like it's pretty untapped space. And so yeah,
Have you,
I made that Odessa one as like a trial run thing, and then it like worked, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna keep on doing this.
that's really cool. Yeah, I really enjoyed I think I saw the Dead Mouse and the Madian ones. Those are the ones I watched. I'll check your Odessa one out. I've always been like a passive fan of Odessa. Like I'm not super fan, but like I have their music. I have I think A Moment Apart on vinyl. Like I love their stuff, but I'm not like a super fan. So I'll have to check it out and get hip.
For
Have
sure.
you done Porter?
What's up?
Porter Robinson? Have you done Porter?
Yes and no. So yeah, I did do a Porter Robinson video. It's different than like the other ones. It's not like the typical documentary style. I
Right.
think it's called like 28 Things You Don't Know About Porter Robinson. And it kind of just goes through, it's like number one, number two.
Got it.
I feel for whatever reason when I made that video, I think I was thinking like I want to try a new format and see how well it works. So yeah. But I mean it's got all the like the
The
little
same.
nuggets that people look for, basically. Yeah.
I'll check that out. Yeah, I'd love to. He's one of my favorite artists too. Um, I've made one documentary in my life, like one of those type of videos, I should say, and it was an Ableton one. It was kind of a bigger project I did a few years ago where um, I kind of blended my hobby of old computers and Ableton and music production, and because I don't know if I mean you're clearly like involved in the producer world. If you've ever gone on the Ableton website, you can download every version of Ableton like historically if you go back in the
Hmm.
version history. So I was like, somebody needs to do that, like install every version. And I have like the computer collection to do it because I have like stuff back to the 90s. And I worked with the Ableton team and we managed to download and install and activate every version of Ableton except for version 1 through 3, which require a physical CD that has like a license on the disc because they didn't actually have like an online authentication server at the time, which is kind of crazy. Like you actually have to buy the physical disc, and I made a documentary about the development and what they added incrementally in each version and like the big highlights to each version. It's kind of interesting. Got some really cool press on it. Like we had, I think, Sound on Sound or like Music Radar. One of those big websites did a thing on it. It's pretty cool. But if you're interested in that, I don't know if you're an Ableton user, but
I am, yeah.
yeah, you'd probably appreciate it then. It's a
Yeah,
really fun and challenging project. So
I didn't realize that you could download like all the older ones. That's pretty
yeah,
wild.
there.
Dude, you should do a video with that. You should do like I made a track in like every version of Ableton or
Somebody
something
told
like
me that
that.
before. I just have not had the time to do it. I definitely at least want to do one in like the first version because I think that that's like obviously the clickbait one. But yes, one in every version would be cool. In the actual documentary, what I did is kind of a similar thing. Is like I added what they added to each version and then transferred the project file up. So like
Okay.
it started in live 3 and then moved all the way up to I think it was 11 at the time. So like every time I would add the features they added to the new one. So I think in 4 they added MIDI, for example. Like yeah,
Oh man, so it was just audio before that?
yeah, it was just audio. Um,
Wow.
you can check out the doc and you can see more about that. But yeah, it's a pretty interesting project. It's called I think I called it Ableton Live Retrospective. I installed every version or something.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out.
Mhm.
What version were you on when you started producing in 2012? Was that 8?
Um, it was either 7 or 8. I know I had 7 installed for some reason or another, but I want to say 8 was the one that I really got like deep into.
Mm-hmm.
I distinctly remember when 9 came out, like I had already been using 8 and it was like a huge change. So I'd say 8. I know I used 7 briefly, but like I want to say it was 8 at the time.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Do you upgrade every time a new one comes out?
Yeah, I'm fortunate that I'm kind of part of like loosely part of like an Ableton ambassador thing where they generally send me the software each time. So I usually get the updates. So I'm on top of it. I'm on the 12 beta already. Uh,
Okay.
yeah.
Is that like only available to like ambassadors right now, or is
The
that
12
available on the
beta, I
website?
think you can apply to be a part of it. But I'm not sure if they're still doing that because it's coming out in like a week.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people talk about it on Reddit. Every
Yeah.
time I hear an announcement for an update, I'm like, oh crap. I'm on
Yeah.
11 right now, but I don't know. Usually like I like to learn everything and just kind of like stick with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll probably get it anyways.
12 is one of the biggest changes they've ever done.
Hmm.
Got a lot of cool new stuff that I really like. Much bigger than 11 was from 10, but yeah, check it out. Uh, it's a learning curve compared to the others, though.
Okay. Do you use a push?
Yeah, I've got one right here, which you can't see.
Which model are you on?
I'm on the 2 still.
Okay. That
Gotten
new
the-
one looks crazy. I'm on the original one still. I bought it like as soon as I bought Ableton when I first started producing,
Oh,
just thinking because I was on such a hardware kick. I feel
nice.
like when you first and plugins too. I feel like when you first start, you're just like, I got to get everything. Like this is gonna make my music so much better. I do love the push, but yeah,
That's a huge that's something I like to try to implore or what's the I
put
guess
emphasis on.
yeah, it's something I like to put emphasis on to new musicians is not to overdo it on the plugins. Like I guarantee you that you actually cannot hear the difference between an EQ in Ableton and a Fab Filter EQ at your level. Like
Yeah,
the difference in quality between like software and hardware comes when you have 10,000 hours and you can hear like the 2% difference out of the 98. I see a lot of producers, I think they utilize gear acquisition as a sort of like crutch to like, this is going to make my music better. When in reality, it's like your music gets better when you get better as a producer. And the gear will like incrementally increase that as you've already been a better musician. You
yeah,
know, like if you can't write a song, getting a Moog sub 37 is not going to make your song better. It's like only going to make it better if you can already do that with like a serum patch or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Did you ever buy any plugins back in the day that you look back on and you're like, that's pretty funny that or like that you were just obsessed with and you thought it was going to be like the next big thing?
Yeah, I wouldn't say any I was really obsessed with. There was a few that like I had a strangely long stint with. Like I remember I was really into Absinthe for a while, I don't know if you've ever used it, but it's very
No.
experimental, like native instruments. It's like a really like left field uh, synth, and I don't know why I was so into it, but I was really into it when I was early on. I swore by it, and it's just like a really overly complicated thing for what it is. Like I was trying to make like plucks in it. You know, it's like the most simple like massive patch could have done it, but I don't have any that I'm like, you know, weary of buying. I definitely have some that like I don't know why it's still in my collection, but like I wouldn't say like any of them are completely useless.
Yeah.
I did this review one time. It was a really funny one. It's this plugin called Weaponizer, and the video review is still on my YouTube channel. It's from like 5 or 6 years ago, and the whole premise of the plugin is that it's like a gun synthesizer, so like it makes weapon sounds, and it's like not very useful for anything else except for like maybe Foley for like a game or a movie or something.
Yeah.
I still have it installed. I can call it up when I want if I ever want like a gunshot.
It's pretty funny.
It's really funny. Yeah, it's really funny.
Do you do any production work outside of the Julian Gray project?
Yeah, I'm actually working on a band project right now. I can't announce, but it's a new project that I'm working on for like my music. So it's like a group a part of, and that'll probably be coming out sometime this year. I also do a lot of client stuff. So like I'll either ghost produce or engineer for a ton of different musicians. Usually on the mixing side. Um, yeah, I mean, over the years I've worked on a lot of stuff, but uh, it's funny you should say that because I am starting like a new side project. You'll hear about it soon.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Have you ever had like with ghost production, have you ever had where you produce a track for somebody and then it does like so well, you're kind of like you have like a weird feeling about it?
I don't think I've ever produced something that was incredibly successful in that way. The closest thing I can say to that is that I had one track where this artist basically took my YouTube tutorial on how to make a track or whatever and then released it. And
Oh
then
man.
it did really well, like Spotify editorial and everything. And we eventually worked it out, but it was like that was the closest thing that's ever happened to me. It was like basically a 1-to-1 of the tutorial. Um, but yeah, no, I've and then even if it did happen, I'm not like mad about it. I know that I went into that thing to do this work. You know, like that's that the work when the work is completed, it's completed.
For sure. Oh dude,
No,
nice dead mouse pop by the way.
yeah. Oh, you know what? This is even cooler.
Oh dude. How'd you get that?
So,
Is that's not like an actual like one,
oh,
is
it's
it?
made. Do you know Gabriel and Dresden, the artist?
No.
They're like an Andrew now, like OG, and I did a show with them, and they had it custom made for me. Basically, every artist they had on that tour, they had a custom made Funko for. It was really cool,
Dang, that's sweet.
which I stole from the studio at
Oh
Monster Cat,
nice.
which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Monster Cat was like one of the first labels I ever heard. I think I found them around like 2010, 2011, maybe. It was do you know Tut Tut Child?
I don't know.
I feel like I don't know, I haven't kept up with them, so I don't know if they're like still releasing, but yeah, they made a lot of dubstep back in like 2010, 2011, and that was my Monster Cat introduction.
Yeah, I was into like Nitro Fun. I would say Karma Fields was a big one for me there. I liked Puppet. Not a whole lot. Afixa actually was, wow, that's like a throwback. Like the Zelda music thing.
I only know one Afixa song, but I'm like in love with it. It's seriously one of my favorite tracks like ever.
They're
Do you know?
cool.
I think it's called Matches. Do you know that one?
I don't know
I
actually.
think it came out in like 2016. I'll have to send it to you. I might have like a, what's the word? I don't know. I might be like overly attached to it just because it's like so nostalgic, basically. But like, I love that track. Like every time I listen to it, it's so good.
I there's a Zelda remix that he did in like 20, it had to have been like 2009 or something. Like it was a long time ago. It was a remix of Song of Storms from Ocarina of Time, and he had this rapper on it, and it was like a viral YouTube moment, and that song had me in a chokehold when I was like 15. I liked Monster Cat, but I was a bigger fan of Silk, actually, if you're familiar with them.
I'm not sure.
So there was this music label called Silk Music. They were previously Silk Royale, and it was a similar type of label to Monster Cat, like in the 2000s for progressive house. You have like your Shingo Nakamura, Nigel Good, handful of other ones. Vintage Morelli was on there, and they were acquired by Monster Cat or something like that. They merged together in 2020, I think, and they became a conglomerate. So Silk became their like progressive label under Monster Cat. So I've released on their progressive one, which is Silk. It's great to speak with you.
Thanks for doing this, dude. I appreciate it.
Sure, of course. I'm glad to be a part, and I'm a fan of your documentaries.
I want to give a big thanks to Julian for doing this interview. It means a lot to have support from an artist like him, and I'm grateful that he took time out of his day to do this interview with me. If you want to subscribe to his YouTube channel, it's called Julian Gray Media, and he posts his music, Ableton tutorials, vlogs, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Also, be sure to check out his record label, Graydient Collective, and go listen to Forsetti, Villager, and Jace. And last thing, if this is your first time watching my channel, be sure to subscribe for documentaries about your favorite artist, as well as more interviews like this.